One. And we are live, cueing the music now.
Podcasting from Boston, Massachusetts and Los Angeles, California, this is AVShopTalk, covering the latest audiovisual trends and emerging technologies. This is where the AV pros come to talk shop, with your hosts, Nate Schneider and Jason Griffin.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining us for this live edition of AV Shop Talk. We trust that you found the link properly and you are actually here. So just to let everybody know what's happening, this is our first live edition of AV Shop Talk. So some people might be still listening through the traditional channels of iTunes and subscribing that way. And other people may be tuning in live to see the live video. And I just wanted to let you guys know that you can participate in this live event by tweeting at AVShopTalk, or in the Google Hangouts application, there is a Q&A section, and you can leave us a question. And what we're going to do is basically talk about 4K. We're going to talk about UHD, the differences between them, some marketing confusion, why it's like that, how it got there. We're going to touch on net neutrality. We're going to get to some career advice for AV professionals, and then we're going to circle back to your questions. So don't worry, we will get your questions. It just may take a little bit longer to do that. So I hope you stick around for that, and really excited about this. Hangouts-On-Air are really fun. Once you get over the logistics and technical stuff, I think they're a blast. So anyway, Jason, I'm going to kick it over to you out in Los Angeles and let you introduce our fine guests that have joined us tonight.
All right, yeah, thanks, Nate, and happy to be here. Super excited for our first AV Shop Talk live episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're pleased and honored to welcome a couple of special guests on with us this evening. So I'll just go ahead and kick it around the horn and give both of our guests a chance to introduce themselves. Guys, probably most of the people listening or watching know who you are, but let's assume that maybe that's not the case, and just give a brief introduction of yourself and kind of what your role is in the industry, and maybe a little bit of background. So we'll start with Josh.
All right. Most people know me at this point, I think. My name is Josh Schrago. I've been in the industry for about 15 years at this point. You probably are very familiar with me from my Sound Reason blog, so soundreason.org. I've worked for a manufacturer as a trainer and consultant liaison. I currently work for an integrator here in San Jose, California, and as of today, literally today, I am the manager of audio-visual engineering.
Oh, wow.
So this is my big news for the day.
This is a promotion?
Yes.
Well, congratulations. Great timing.
Yeah, couldn't have come at a better time for this.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. So that's kind of what's going on right now. And again, you can find, but I also write in addition to writing for soundreason.org, I also write for Infocom All Voices blog. I've written for Sound and Communications, and I've written for the Red Band Group pretty exclusively as well, where I have taken on your other guest at various points in time, Mr. Mark Coxon over there.
Yeah, Mark. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well? And you're with Milestone now, and just let everybody know kind of, I think Chief is probably one of the bigger brands that people associate with, but just let us know about Milestone and kind of where you're coming from, maybe where you blog.
Sure. Yeah, I've also been in the industry about 14, 15 years at this point. I started on the IT side at IBM way back in 2000, and then ended up in home AV on the integration side, and then was in commercial integration for another 5-6 years here in California before landing with Chief at Milestone. So I have a territory of California, Nevada, Hawaii, and I'm lucky enough actually to work with Josh because his company falls under my purvey, and I was very excited earlier today when I heard Josh got promoted. So congratulations, my man. I know you've been working hard to get there and putting in your dues. And in fact, I've met Josh on a job site to then go have lunch afterwards and talk about what he found. So I know he has a great base of knowledge, but that doesn't mean that we always agree with one another. But that's why the industry's big and there's a lot of room. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you guys are alluding to, we're gonna get to soon here, and we're going to kind of give you guys a chance to sort of hash that out. It was alluding to kind of a debate, I would call it, a healthy debate on Twitter about some of the merits of HDMI and HDMI 2.0 in particular. But before we jump into that, I feel like we should start out with a discussion about 4K. 4K is kind of all the rage right now. It's what everyone's talking about. It was arguably the hottest topic at Infocom. Definitely what I heard about the most, watching from a distance. 4K all over the place. One of the things that technical people like us sort of, I feel like maybe get hung up on a little bit, but arguably for good reason, is the difference, and it's the difference between UHD and 4K. And these are terms that we hear, thrown around all the time in marketing, and they're pretty much used synonymously. And Mark, I know you've written a recent blog post that covered 4K and some of that, general topics. So I'll start out by giving you a chance to chime in on this. And what do you feel like the implications are of this market confusion in general?
I don't know that we're going to change at this point. It seems like the ball is rolling with the term 4K. I know early on that's not something that we have. 4K referred to a cinema, width of pixels, which was 4,096 pixels wide, right? And what we have is UHD is 2160p, which is, if you think of what we do in flat panels in homes and in our commercial environments, we're always talking about 1080p. So it made more sense that we would stick with that nomenclature to go to the double the vertical resolution as opposed to horizontal pixels. But for some reason, 4K stuck, and it seems like that's probably what we're going to be debating for some time. I don't think there are a lot of implications as far as whether something's real 4K versus 2160p, unless you're going to cinema and you're, if you're trying to put a true 4K signal on a 2160p display, you're either going to have to crop it or you're going to have to, letterbox it, one of the two. And I think we're used to that when we see cinema content, so I don't know that that's going to be a huge hurdle. But guys who create content are definitely going to want to make sure that they're creating content not in 4096 by whatever vertical aspect ratio they're going to use, but in the 3840 by 2160, because that's what the displays are going to receive native, and that's what they're going to show best without having to use the little $5 scaler that's going to drop the ball and cause mosquitoes to fly across the screen. So.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this, because I think 4K is a misnomer, and I do think it causes confusion, and I know there's probably some people that may tune into this video or watch this video after it's been uploaded to YouTube and it's no longer live, and we want to make sure we're talking about things clearly. So, I guess the way I think about it is I start with 720p, 1080p. That's very comfortable. 720p might be referred to as HD. 1080p might be referred to as full HD. And then once you get into the higher resolutions, the 4K class of resolutions, things change a little bit, and it goes by the width instead of the height. So instead of going by 2160, which I think is the term that we should all really be using, so we know what we're talking about, the 2160, that to me is more of a 2K thing. So you've got these different terms of 2K, 4K, UHD. Even I've heard quad full HD. Have you guys heard quad HD before? Like basically 1080p times 4. So I don't know, how can we talk about things in such a way that people understand kind of where we're coming from and it doesn't cause any more marketing confusion? I mean, should we kick this over to Josh? Do you have any ideas, or do you want to add to the conversation?
Well, the problem was that when we started talking about 4K and UHD, UHD sort of, it was sort of a secondary thing. It was, people sort of jumped all the way up to 4K, and then there were screens that weren't quite to 4K standards and weren't quite reaching that point. And so what ended up happening was the marketing terms sort of eventually, as all the screens reached a near-ish point around that 4K mark, they sort of melded together. And my biggest frustration over this was during CES earlier this year, when you turn on the news in the morning and they're talking, oh, look at all these high-resolution displays and this and that. and you end up getting into the circumstance where people think that they're interchangeable terms, and they're not. I mean, what is a 4K? Technically speaking, all 4Ks are UHD, but all UHDs are not 4K. And it's that sort of distinction that hasn't made its way to the public yet. So is it going to be a problem in the long run? Probably not, and most people aren't. Most consumers probably aren't going to notice a big difference. But it gets to the point where, as for commercial displays, particularly for things like along the lines of digital signage, or when you're getting into large format displays for boardrooms or other things like that, that's where you may run into, and you're going to have to go back and double check the specs, and you're going to have to ensure that what you're getting is what you actually want, as opposed to cutting yourself short by a few pixels. That's really the big misnomer, is that it's not a drastic difference yet, but there is a difference, and it needs to be accounted for.
Well, I think going back to what Nate had said on 2K, I mean 2K again was a 2048 wide format for film, is what 2K was. 1920 by 1080p was never 2K, but it was the width of the piece, the width of the screen. And I think, if you go to broadcast, they define 3840 by 2160 as UHD 1. That's what it is. It's ultra high definition 1, and 7680 by 4320 is UHD 2. And those are the two terms that they use and the resolutions they use when aiming. And if you think about in a broadcast environment or an existing content environment, those resolutions don't want to change, because we're working on this backbone of 1080p that people have been producing for quite some time, and they're wanting to scale that easily, which is why we're going with the 2160 and the 4320 as opposed to going to the cinema formats, because those pixel translations don't happen easily, and the math gets messy and things look gross. So I think when you're talking about content creation, when you're talking about scaling an image that's not native up to a display, it's very important to know what the image is you're dealing with exactly and what the display is exactly, or you're going to have some mismatches that may decrease the quality of the image. So
yeah. No, those are all great points, and I think you guys are both right on the money when you say that this becomes a lot more important for people kind of on our side of the industry, or content creators, broadcasters, people who kind of work with it. I personally think that as far as your everyday consumer who's maybe in the market for a new TV, I think that there actually is some value, personally, and this is my opinion on it, to just keeping it simple. 4K, it's a catchy term, it's easy to market. UHD is kind of the same way. I don't see 2160p catching on ever, even though we kind of look at it and think that technically that's kind of the way it should be. But I think it's important for professionals to understand the difference, and for consumers, I personally don't think it's all that critical. One thing that will be critical with 4K across the board, whether you're a professional or a consumer, is the challenges of adopting this new technology in terms of infrastructure. And Mark, I'm going to let you kind of kick this one off again, because this all ties together with the recent post of yours. Basically, what we're talking about here with 4K is a significant increase in the requirement for bandwidth to send audio-video signals. And so, are we as an industry prepared for that? And what are some of the biggest challenges that you think the integration industry will face as we move forward with adopting 4K?
Yeah, I think we have a couple issues. One is we're dealing with a lot of existing backbone out in the space, and it's real easy to say we'll just have everybody pull new cable to every location. But we know a lot of times when we're looking at budgets for projects and those things, that's not a realistic expectation that every time they're going to rework the whole building in order to upgrade from their 1080p signage or distributed video system to a 4K system, right? And so, what we found is that a lot of the cable isn't made the same, right? The cable has to have a certain data integrity in order to distribute 4K, and it's not going to be clean and consistent across the board. On the broadcast side, they have a lot of concerns because 4K doesn't look good in 8-bit color, and it doesn't look good translated back and forth. So when you try to translate a 4K signal back down to a 1080p signal for the people that still have those sets, doesn't look as great. And when you try to translate a 1080p video into a 4K color space, it doesn't look as great. So there are a lot of infrastructure problems in broadcast as well that, consumers who watch TV, I don't know if you remember, Jason, when people first got their first 70-inch TV and they watched standard def on it, they're calling and complaining that this new TV looks terrible. This is awful. There's no HD content. Everything's being upscaled from 480 into this 1080 or 720p set. And people were unhappy. And it really kind of put a damper on HD for a while. And I'm afraid that you're going to see some of that in 4K. People are buying these sets expecting this huge difference. Yeah, they get great pixels when they're watching the test screens, but when they watch what they want to watch, they get a headache, right? So, there's a problem there. Our storage media, which Josh has pointed out, Blu-ray wasn't really made for 4K or for deeper color. It was made for MPEG-4 and 1080p. So we have some work to do on storage media. May have to go back to server-based systems, obviously, to store these things, which means more terabytes or cloud. If we go to the cloud, you're still putting on a drive. It's just not in your house. Now you got to worry about internet bandwidth. And so, we have a lot of things that happen around this. And then, the other thing is this last mile, actually getting it out of that device into the set. And, I think that's where the HDMI discussion comes in. There's a lot of bravado around the new spec. But this is where I guess I tell Josh it's a lot funner to take a swing at me in person than 140 characters at a time on Twitter. So we'll definitely talk through the merits of that. But the HDMI has had a hard time now distributing our current signals, especially in distributed video situations, in so much that we have a whole industry that spawned up around creating patches for HDMI. We have EDIV emulators. We have Atlona promoting all these new boxes now because cable boxes aren't going to talk to new displays that have 2.0 if you don't have the right cable box. So you're going to have to put an emulator in there to trick it to think it's talking to the right display. We have HD-based T, which really only came about because we couldn't extend HDMI over category cable the old way, the way that we were used to doing it. We needed to create some whole new electrical method of extending these signals just to get them back and forth. And so I think, we can argue that HDMI 2.0 is not out yet, but I think my joke that got this all started on Twitter is based on record. Wouldn't we call it HDMI 0 and 2? Because that's exactly what it has been at this point.
Yeah, and I tuned in a little bit late to that debate, but that was kind of the genesis for inviting you guys on here. There's obviously more. We're not going to spend the whole time talking about it, but Josh, I'll give you a chance to chime in here because Mark, he touched on some of the points, some of his qualms with HDMI. Mark and I have had some fun on Twitter in the past, just going back and forth and taking shots at HDMI because it's, in a way, it relieves us, right? It feels good. It's therapeutic. But Josh, you make some good points, so I'll let you chime in here about HDMI 2.0.
And, well, that Twitter conversation spawned where we are sitting right now and what's happening at this moment. It also spawned when it went up on soundreason.org last week, which was, why are we such a damn negative industry? Why is everything that isn't out yet already crap? That's what I'm tired of. We see what the specs are promising, and we see what the specs are capable of. Is it here yet? Yeah, HDMI 2.0 is in its complete infancy. It's starting to evolve into certain products, but it's just getting here. We don't really know what it's capable of yet, so how can you already say it's failed? The fact is HDMI a perfect solution? God, no. It is not. It's never been. It's got issues. Everybody knows it's got issues. I will never debate the fact that HDMI 1.3, 1.4, they had issues. HDMI 2.0, I guarantee, will also have its own issues. However, what my point in all of this that kept going back was, Mark took issue with one of my points that a connection from your local media server to your local display could be done over HDMI. I also said it could be done over DisplayPort, which he neglected to leave in. But so the first thing I want to bring up about the HDMI is when you're talking about that connection of a media server to a display, how far are you going? I mean, yes, in some of the higher scale residential situations, you're talking potentially 50, 100 feet, where you're going to have to utilize extenders and HD-based technology and all of those kinds of things to get it out there. But in most cases, in most homes, the TV, the players, they're all pretty centrally located. So we're talking 6 feet. So I got to take the bandwidth from my media server to my 4K display once 4K content magically starts to exist in some format somewhere, and I can connect over that. Is it possible, based on the HDMI 2.0 spec, to do that? And the answer is yes, it is. And based on spec. Now, is that the reality of the situation? We don't know yet. And Mark, you can continue to roll your eyes at me, but the fact is, you don't know.
Well, we don't know. We don't know exactly how it's going to work. Let me tell you something. A specification is as good as its clarity and as its enforcement, right? And HDMI has proven time and time again that they're not very clear on what they require in their spec, and they're not good at enforcing the product to make sure that the spec is met. We have a system right now where an HDMI cable can't carry a 1080p signal consistently and still get a handshake, depending on which cable you use. Most of that because of the eye signature of the cable, right? The way that the data goes through the cable. And now we're going to push more data through that same cable where we haven't changed anything except a chipset. We haven't changed architecture. If you told me, Josh, HDMI 2.0 has a whole new connector and a whole new cable, I'd say, you know what, 100%. We got to make sure we like that cable and that connector. We got to test that thing. We got to bench test it. You're going to use the same connector. You're going to use the same cable architecture, and you're going to push twice as much data through it with a new chipset, with a company that, or with an organization that has pretty much fallen on its face when it comes to making sure that products that have the HDMI sticker work consistently. I mean, I think I told you, I come from northern Idaho, and I'm walking through the woods, I see something on the ground, it looks like a bear trap. Last time it was a bear trap. I'm not going to stick my foot in it just to see, right? I'm going to make darn sure. I'm going to poke it with a stick a few times. You trust and verify until every time you verify that it doesn't work, then you quit trusting, you verify first, you trust later. So,
but wait, no. This actually touches on the very thing I said, which is verify that it won't meet the spec first, don't crap on it. So you're confirming the very thing that I said to do. Are you not? Are you not?
I don't believe that I am, because
I rest my case. I rest my case.
You're giving a blind.
I can jump in here for a second.
Yeah,
go ahead, Mark.
No, I was
I
going
was say that a lot of this.
I feel like you're giving a blind trust in the specification, right?
I'm not giving a blind trust. I never said it would work. I said the possibility existed that it would work based on the specification. Whether or not it meets that spec is an entirely different issue.
Okay. Yeah, and I think
that's where personal responsibility to verify your design and functionality comes into play. It is a personal responsibility in the AV industry, and it can't just be done on rumor. It can't. We need to stop living on the hearsay of what came before it and actually verify what's current.
But we also have to live in a world of reality where we say, hey, we've got a serious problem here. We're paying HDMI X amount of cents every time we put a connector on something. Guys are making millions of dollars on connectors and chipsets going into gear that in most of our commercial environments doesn't work right the first time, and hopefully it does the second, right? And we've got whole other alternate technologies that we got pretty much pushed out of the way by a political machine with HDMI to get that licensing fee. DisplayPort hasn't taken off because there's no money behind it. It's a free license. That's why DisplayPort doesn't take off, and that's why half of the devices that, even though DisplayPort is 100% HDCP compliant and has much better properties in its cable and connectors, it doesn't go anywhere because there's no money behind it. HD SDI is used in movie theaters, 6G SDI, 12G SDI is coming out. We can get there with a dual connection, and I guarantee you, most people that I know would rather pull two pieces of cable that they know are going to work, which we had to do with HDMI anyway on most of our extenders before HD-based was pull two. None of the single extenders work consistently. I'd rather pull two coax and have a little Ethernet connection between the two for security than pull one piece of cable that doesn't work. So as an industry, what happens is I feel like sometimes we eat what's fed to us, right? And I know to a certain extent we have to look at what's adopted on gear, but we have a voice too. I mean, we go to InfoComm for a reason. We have the ear of these manufacturers for a reason. To go to somebody and say, hey, put a display port on something, or I'm not buying your displays anymore, because guess what? HDMI is not working for me. That's not negative, Josh. That's helping, trying to promote something to get things to a better state.
But
and
that's not what you did.
But
that's not what you did.
What I did.
All right. I gotta step in here. We're gonna turn this into like a cage match eventually. But I do appreciate the discourse and the dialogue. It's good to kind of hear the back and forth to try to figure out what's going on here, and I appreciate the comments there. Before Jason, did you have another question, or did you want to
yeah, I just
chime in about HDMI real quick?
Comment, and we got a nice comment here in the chat from Greg Brown. He said it's called HDMI because all the other four-letter words were taken. And,
nice.
I think there is some truth to that. Again, it's a hot topic, and I know you guys have debated it in the past, and we don't want to kick a dead horse here. I will say that I think a lot of the argument with HDMI it gets into this idea of like you start to curse HDMI, and then you get the people who come to the rescue and say, well, no, it's the spec is fine, it's the implementation that's wrong. It's the manufacturer who implemented it incorrectly. That's what's screwing you up. Well, I think to get to Mark's point, and I got to be honest, I kind of come down on Mark's side of this. Like, I'm very skeptical about 2.0, but I get where Josh is coming from as well. But at the end of the day, like Mark said, a specification is really only as good as its enforcement. And if they're putting out a specification and they're charging licensing on it the way Mark clearly pointed out, then I think it's on HDMI to make sure that these components just work. And I've had so many problems with HDMI in my past that I just have trouble being anything but skeptical about it.
Yeah. Okay. I see another comment in here. I think this comment thing is awesome, by the way. Thanks guys for leaving all these comments. Let me just take a look real quick here. So there's another one from this one's from Greg Brown as well. What is the ratio of all the upcoming formats? 16 by 9? Question mark. Well, 2160 by 3840. I guess I can answer this one. Is 1.78. So it's 1 to 7/8. 16 by 9.
Yep.
So that one. So Ultra HD or 2160, which I like to call it, will be the same, 16 by 9. But once you go to 4K DCI, which I think Mark was talking about earlier, which is the cinema format, it is actually 17 by 9. So it is a little bit different, and that's the letterboxing that I think you were referring to earlier, Mark.
Yeah, so there are actually multiple. See, the reason that cinema never defined that other area is because it really depends on how you shoot the film. So you can shoot in 235/1, which is anamorphic, or you can shoot in something that's more closer to an HD. So they never defined really the other limit. They just said all the formats need to be 4096 wide. You can put whatever height on it you want. So they always knew what they were dealing with width-wise, which is why they always deemed it 2K, 4K, 8K, because the heights would always vary. So they knew they could deal with a standard width.
Great. Jason, any more questions about 4K and HDMI, maybe before we shift to the next topic?
Yeah, I think that Tim Albright asked a good question to kind of circle back to 4K adoption and what's driving the technology, and which is more important to drive this new technology? Is it content first and then the displays and the technology to back it up, or is it pushing these displays out there before there's content to really kind of drive the content creators to adopt and then put out the content? It's kind of chicken and the egg question, but Mark, what do you think about that?
These displays have been available on the content creation side for quite some time. I mean, guys have been using, even WQXGA was out for quite a while. It never turned into a home format where we tried to push, a 2560 by 1680 display into a house, right? So we've had enhanced resolutions for commercial applications for quite some time. Even if you think about source material, if I tried to sell you what's a 3840 by 2160p display is like an 8 megapixel image. If I tried to sell you an 8 megapixel camera today, you'd laugh at me, right? You've got better than that on your phone. So, we've been working with creating content, with dealing with content on the commercial and production side for quite some time in resolutions much higher than what we're going to actually do at the end when we render it out to play it, on the end display. So I don't know necessarily that just putting out the displays helps us drive high-end content. A lot of this content is created in a higher-end place and then scaled down. Look at any digital cinema package now in a movie theater. They're all made in 12-bit color. They're all made in JPEG 2000. They're all made in ultra-high resolution. They have to be made that way. Every digital movie has to be made to that spec. And then it gets played on TNT in 480 lines on standard def, right? So I don't think it takes the displays being out for the content creators to want to do that. They want to do that so they can see the clarity of the information that they're putting out. My brother-in-law works for Lockheed Martin and does content creation for them for like when they want to sell $1 billion airplane. He's the one who does the graphics, right? He has a 4K display in his house that he renders everything out on, even though that'll never be played on the other end at the Pentagon on anything but a 1080p sat on the wall, at least now. So I think that the push on displays is really, that we've saturated the market with 1080p and display sales have lagged. And if you look at the history of LCD, I read a really great article. I wish I could remember where it was at. But if you look at LCD technology on the whole, it's a loser. LCD hasn't made money as an industry. Companies have made money on LCD, but not the ones who put in all the original R&D and development. Sharp was one of the first people getting LCD out, and they're the ones going bankrupt, right? Mm-hmm. Having to cut divisions. So, we've got this investment in LCD technology and panels. People have bought what they're going to buy, and we need to give them a reason to replace what's in their house. And this is 3D didn't work. This has been around a while. Why not try this now? That's where I really think we're going. So.
Yeah, you make some great points, and I don't want to get stuck on 4K. We talked about some of the adoption challenges, and during that conversation, the topic of storage, media storage, and possibly having to move some of this to the cloud and streaming, that came up, and I wanted to make sure that we leave a little bit of time here to jump into this idea of net neutrality. And I know, Josh, this is a topic that you've dealt with a lot. I watched your Hangout-On-Air at Infocom where you had the panel on and discussed this, and we'll include a link to that in the show notes. I highly recommend it for anybody who's trying to get up to speed on what this whole net neutrality thing is all about. Can you, just in case anyone is watching, isn't familiar with what net neutrality really means in a nutshell, Josh, can you kind of break that down and give them a simple explanation as to what's going on now?
So what's going on right now is the FCC proposed potential rules. Back in, January, the one of the appellate courts, I believe it was in Virginia, struck down the FCC ruling on the regulations that they had placed on net neutrality after they had been sued by Verizon, which basically said that rule that they were applying basically said all data has to be treated as equal. That's what the FCC had done. The court struck it down because they said that due to the fact that the internet and broadband communications are based on Section 706, which is an informational based service under the FCC regulations, the law, what the FCC was trying to do is illegal. And one of the big debates that brought up was, well, the best thing to do then is to move it under Title II. Title II would be telecommunications, where it's like your phone system, so very heavily regulated, low cost, available to everybody. And then the great debate began over that and how that was going to play out. One of the things that the FCC did as sort of a way to avoid going into Title II, which is going to tie everything up in courts for years to come, is they proposed what about a fast lane? What do you guys think about this? Where paid prioritization, so the content providers that are producing the majority of content, and as is documented, between Netflix and YouTube after 5 p.m. in a given region, that's 50% of the internet traffic going to residential communities, is just between those two sites. And they said that anybody producing higher levels of content has the ability to pay for prioritized distribution of their content. And this just stirred up everybody because they got into censorship questions of the little guys not being able to compete with the big guys and everything that goes along with that. But what I focused on was how is that going to actually impact the AV industry due to the fact that we have moved into this AV-IT merge of all of our signals are starting to move onto the network, and how is that much more traffic and that much more limited bandwidth going to affect our ability to stream signals across a given area. So that kind of gives the overall roundup of sort of where all this goes.
Yeah, no, and it's a good roundup, and I appreciate it. I've followed you on this topic, and you're certainly a very knowledgeable resource when it comes to net neutrality. Nate, I wanted to kick it over to you. You were at Infocom. Was this kind of a hot topic in your opinion? Did you have any chance to kind of engage with anyone on the topic? Maybe share some of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I think net neutrality, the only reason it was really brought up at Infocom, I think, was because of what Josh was doing to try to, spark some interest in the industry and kind of bring the topic front and center. And I think he did that with his podcast that he recorded live there. With I think you had some people from where? From Blue Jeans. Where were your panelists from again?
Rob Woods from Blue Jeans. I had Simon Dudley from Life Size, and I had Bob Romano from Avaya.
Okay, so those are guys that, this is very important to the products that they create because they live on the network. And I guess when I first heard about net neutrality, my first reaction was kind of like I was angry about it. I was like, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? We need an open and free internet. And what I came to realize was that it's not that simple. So it's not like you can be either for net neutrality or against net neutrality. It's not a yes or no. It's a fact that right now the internet, as we know it, is the Wild West, and people can do whatever the heck they want. And shady things are happening right now where people, internet service providers are going to other service providers that live on the network, and they're, saying, hey, pay up because, your service is getting slow over here, and we're going to need you to pay a little bit extra. And so that's not right. But the fast lane thing doesn't sit well with me either. And I think we would be well served to really think this through and get some very knowledgeable people to come up with a good solution legally. I'm not sure what that is. I don't know what the best solution is, but I can tell you this: we need bigger pipes. We need to upgrade the infrastructure. That's what makes this go away. If we have faster internet in the United States, that makes a lot of these issues go away. But right now, that's not a reality. That's pretty much where I'm at with net neutrality. I haven't gone into the Title II stuff, the telephone law that was passed in like the mid 1900s or early 1900s or something like that. That is somehow going to be applicable here. I guess there's certain parts of it that are good and certain parts of it that are antiquated. I'm not quite sure about that, but anyway, that's my take on net neutrality. Yeah. It's important. You should definitely look into it more. Read some of the blog posts. I think I shared Josh's latest post. I can put that up again. But,
yeah, and there's a master link to all of the ones that I've written, both for my site and for Infocom as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a lot of great resources out there. It's easily one of those topics that you can kind of get mired down in the politics and some of the details of it, but just understanding it from a high level, I feel like, is really important. Mark, do you have anything you wanted to add to the just the idea of net neutrality in general and the FCC's current stance on it?
I defer to Josh. I know enough to know my opponent and not to disagree with somebody who's done such a great job in documenting what's going on. I actually followed Josh's blog posts on that as well. I'll tell you, you sent an interesting link to us as a pre-show piece. Is good the enemy of perfect on net neutrality? And I think that's really what we're going to find. Is I think people are going to be fighting for two extremes, but the answer really is going to lie in the middle somewhere. One of the things that really hit home for me in that is when I was at IBM. I had a customer that was mentioned in that article named Akamai Technologies, and Akamai is out of Massachusetts, so they're in Nate's neck of the woods. In fact, they lost their CTO in a flight into the World Trade Center back in 2001 out of Logan. But a great company. But what they do is they do web caching. So, if you're CNN or ESPN and you're hosting the website for the Super Bowl, you got to make sure that doesn't crash, right? And so these guys have server farms full of internet, web caching appliance servers, little 1U servers in there just caching websites. And their one that they mentioned has always had a chance to buy, even under the old rules, to buy some extra bandwidth to make sure they can get things out. That never violated the rules because they had no investment really into content. There wasn't like any insider trading between the two, right? But where you could say if I'm NBC Universal or I'm Time Warner, I'm not going to let NBC Universal content go over to Time Warner Cable. Then there's a big problem, right? If it's free and open and you can pay for something, I don't know that there's such a problem with that. Other than the fact that, like what Josh said, maybe it adds to people not being able to compete in the system. So I think it's a very complicated issue, like you said, Jason, and I don't have the answer to it, but I'll be following closely with what Josh puts out. So.
Yeah, and I think you're right on the money there. I would agree with you that the answer lies somewhere in the middle. It's really not a clear-cut issue. As easy as it is to sort of demonize the ISPs and kind of cast them in the light of kind of a dark, shadowy group that's out to take all of our money and kill the internet as we know it. I think when you really dive in and start to understand the topic, you understand pretty quickly that it's a lot more complicated than that, and that there are a lot of angles to it and a lot of facets to it. So it's definitely something to kind of stay on top of. And Josh, we'll quit flattering you here in a second, but for anyone watching who wants to learn more about the topic, definitely Josh is one to follow, and go check out his blog at soundreason.org.
Yeah, and just to give some other references too, there's NPR has a podcast called On Point. I don't know if you're familiar with On Point, but I think it's Tom Brokaw that does that one. Unless I'm completely flubbing the name. But anyway, On Point is the podcast, and they have a really good segment on net neutrality and kind of showing both sides of the coin and really pointing out that it's a little bit more complicated than just surface level. So that's another good resource I'd go to. But it is hard to find good information on that topic, I will admit.
Yeah, it can be a little bit like drinking from a fire hose if you start digging around. So it's definitely good to kind of go to a resource that's related to the AV industry, especially because that's what we want to put that in a light that makes it relevant. But anyways, guys, we're kind of running up against our time here, and wanted to thank you both, Mark and Josh, for taking the time to join us. One of the things, and hopefully I don't surprise you too much with this because I don't think we kind of warned you about this, but one of the things Nate and I like to do, and you might know this if you listen to the show, is we like to our audience to get a little feel for who our guests are on a personal level outside of the AV industry. So I'll start with Mark. And Mark, are there any things you want to share about your, maybe hobbies or just things that you're into outside of the AV industries, like what some of your interests are, anything like that?
Sure. Yeah, I have 3 kids, so obviously they're of great interest to me and take a lot of my time. I have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old, so I have 2 girls and a little boy. And so Disneyland is an every Sunday after church thing. Living in Southern California, I think we've been there. We've been in California 5 years, and I think we've been to Disneyland a little over 400 times in that 5 years. So
wow.
it's that's something that takes a lot of our time. We may be taking a small hiatus from that for a year, but we'll see what we do. The other thing I do, I always said if I could do anything and actually make money doing it, I would teach kickboxing, which I used to teach and I used to compete way back when. And I still teach once a week, but it's not an industry that's very lucrative. And so I do it because I like it, and I just try. I don't even get paid for it. I trade time at the gym for a class on Saturdays. So those are probably the 2 things that take the most of my time outside of AV.
Gotcha. Very cool. And what about you, Josh?
Well, I have a very demanding cat. Yeah, he's probably sitting at home wondering where I am since I'm still at the office at the moment.
Do you take your cat to Disney on the weekends?
Oh God, that would be awesome. I'm a big Disney fan myself, but no, he would lose his crap. He would no. But other than that, I mean, for me, I'm kind of a sciencey sci-fi nerd. If you were to come into my office right now, you'd see Star Wars, Doctor Who, I have a Schrodinger's executive decision maker. So literally, when I can't make up my mind how do I want to do something, I just open the door and find out whether or not the cat is dead or alive to determine it. So, that's more my speed. I mean, there's a golf calendar behind me, and when I do get the free time to get out there and play, I do. But I've come to find that I really just most of my free time is spent, pretty much preparing for the next article, preparing for the next piece, and I get out and as I can. But that's really, it comes down to me being more of a science sci-fi nerd. If I could be at Comic-Con this week, I would be.
I'll tell you real quick, Josh. As a point, at Chief, our goal has been to try to replace that Annixter calendar, because every integrator I go into has that Annixter calendar on the wall. We've tried 18 different formats, and we cannot for the life of us find a calendar that people will use other than that Annixter one. So we may co-brand with them next year. We may have to sponsor it.
So here, the whole story behind this calendar is they walked into our office with a stack of 30 and said, "Which one would you like?" And then moved on, and that was the end of it. It was just like, okay.
Hey,
that's
it's
awesome.
perfectly framed in the shot there, so I'm sure they appreciate that.
I'm sure they do as well. They also had cars and something else, but
military aircraft.
Okay. See, I'm not much of a car guy, and I'm not an aircraft guy, but I'll play golf occasionally when I get the chance. So
Nice.
Right on. Well, thank you guys again for taking the time to join us. Nate, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah. Well, I know you guys might have to run, but I'm willing to stick around and read through some of these questions here. We do have some people that are watching live, and we really appreciate you navigating to the proper link, because I messed up and created the wrong type of event. It wasn't a live Hangout. So if there's confusion at the beginning of this, I apologize. That was my fault. I created the wrong type of Google Hangout. But there are people that made it, so we want to recognize you guys. Mark, Josh, do you guys have to split? I know you might be on a... Yeah.
Okay, well, I can hang out as well. Take some of these questions.
Yeah, feel free. So if you guys have to split, no problem. But if not, let's read through some of the questions here. What do you got over there, Jason? Just read through them all. Give people little shout outs for.
Yeah. So we got 800-pound gorilla here in the chat room, and he's asking what he or she, I should say, I don't know for sure. What, if any, options do end users / the industry have to influence HDMI adopters to ensure that they create a robust and testable specification, and that they enforce it on the manufacturer? And I'll just leave that one open, and any one of you guys can jump in there.
Mark?
I think it's it's as much as writing into the consortium and telling them that you're really concerned about it, that you're going to be looking for products with alternate inputs if you don't know that they're being serious about implementing the new specification in the way that it should be. I mean, it's really hard when you have a lot of momentum behind one connector, right? And I don't know that they're interested in doing anything other than selling the connectors. And I think we all know boycotts don't often work, right? I mean, just saying I'm not going to buy anything with an HDMI port until I know it works isn't going to happen, because you're going to have to break. So I think you just have to make your voice heard. I think you look for things with DisplayPort, you look for other things that are out there, and hopefully at some point they take it seriously that they really need to stand behind their specification. So.
Yep, I think that's a good answer. Did you guys have anything you wanted to add to that, or should we jump to the next question here?
Yeah, just jump to the next one.
Okay, I got one here that I thought was interesting, and it doesn't have much to do with anything that we've talked about, but it has been something I've been watching because it's kind of a cool new thing that's going on. And Paul Konikowski asks, what are your thoughts on the GoPro and applications use drones? Have you guys seen all these drones out there now that you can fly around with your camera on them? And...
I think Chris Netto has his next AV video for Infocom next year. That's what I think.
Yeah, I could see Chris utilizing that for sure.
I think it's cool. I mean, it's a fun little thing. It's a neat way to get informational content out there, or entertaining content out there potentially. A huge amounts of value in the long run. But Not really.
Until
the drones get better.
It's funny because I'll say one thing. Working on the integration side before, I worked with a company where we did the visitor center for Beverly Hills, California, right? And they wanted to create a 55-inch multi-touch screen in there, and so we did gigapans from the Hollywood Hills and did 65 gigapixels zoomable images. We did some walking tours through the town, and if we had had some of those tools, we really could have added some POV content. If you're going to go on a tour from here to here, here's what it looks like when you walk through the door with GoPro. We could have done some really cool stuff off the Hollywood Hills with a camera drop instead of just doing a gigapan, an actual camera drop to go down in the city. So I think depending on what type of AV you're into, I think there are some good specialty uses for it. You just have to be in that niche AV market where you're doing visitor centers, maybe museums, maybe you want a tour of a canyon that you can't get to and you want to do a Grand Canyon exhibit with immersive video. I think there are a lot of opportunities there. It's just we haven't traditionally pursued those as an industry on the whole.
Yeah, I got to speak to this. Okay, I'm going to pull up this screen share here. If you guys have not heard of this, this is to answer your question, Paul, about GoPros and applications. If you've not yet seen this video about the AirDog autonomous drone, this is an auto follow drone. Think about that for a minute. You could be on a snowboard. You send this thing up, you've got a leash on your arm, and this thing just follows you and stays within like 50 yards, filming you automatically wherever you go.
Yay, and Skynet!
And it folds up into like a backpack. So anyway, I heard about this from Eli, the computer guy. I was watching his daily blob that he does. Wow. And this thing is pretty unreal, but that's the thing that comes to mind, and it's kind of scary how crazy this is going. But and the video is going to look really choppy in the live stream here, but you gotta go check this out.
See, that reminds me of Josh said Skynet. Josh said Skynet. I don't know if you guys have seen Chronicle, but it reminds me a lot of that too.
What else we got in that question mark?
Yeah, so Nate, this is another one from Paul, and I kind of wanted to toss this one at you to see if you might be able to give Paul some advice. Sounds like Paul might be in possibly the production side of the business, maybe. And he's saying...
Oh, I know Paul, actually.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, thank you for the questions, Paul.
What does Paul do for work?
Paul used to be a consultant, still does independent AV consulting here in the Bay Area, and he also does AV social media for a couple of groups.
Okay, so that explains the question, I think, here. So here's what we've got. What would you tell a client who said they wanted to create 15 to 30-second video clips that would be video advertisements on Facebook, solution best to record, maybe equipment to test like displays, and then concerns about maybe the resolution as it pertains to bandwidth usage and things of that nature. You do a lot of video on YouTube, so.
Yeah, no, I think the question broke up a little bit there, and our internet connection got a little crazy. I guess we're not paying our ISPs enough. So what? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
You're really trying to get me started, aren't you?
They're trying to shake more money out of us, man. And then we can have Google Hangouts on Air that actually work. They want to create 15 to 30-second video clips that would be advertisements on Facebook or on YouTube. What cameras and resolution would be best to record? So I could tell you what I do on YouTube, and everything I do is 720p. You know, it's worked well enough for me, and it's let me accumulate like 1.6 million views. So for YouTube, I just stick with 720. I mean, when I do get a chance to upgrade, I'm definitely going to move to a camera that can do 1080. I don't know if I'm going to jump to 4K anytime soon, just because of the space that it takes up and the fact that it's going to be squashed and compressed anyway before being uploaded to YouTube. I don't know if there's a huge value in doing that. It all depends on what you want to do and what the client needs. This is a good question, though. It depends on their operating budget, really. Anybody else want to chime in on this one?
I have to defer to Nate on anything video related.
See, when it comes to cameras and stuff, I'm kind of a hack. I like to get the cheapest camera possible and try to get the most out of it. So I download this like hack firmware called CHDK. which allows me to like blow past all the factory defaults and do all kinds of crazy extra settings and stuff like that. So I'm probably not.
I'm literally using a Logitech 1080p webcam right now. That's it.
Yeah.
This is the full extent I go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your video looks pretty good, by the way, Josh. It looks pretty sharp.
This is a really, really nice and very inexpensive camera. I've been really surprised and happy with how it's performed. I think it's the C920. I don't know. I bought it last fall on Black Friday. So.
Looking sharp over there, my friend.
It works.
Well, guys, that's pretty much all the questions we have in the queue. So I think we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. I will cue the outro music if I can find it.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We appreciate it. And swing by avshoptalk.com for all the show notes. We'll throw some links up there. Or follow us on Twitter at AVShopTalk.
All right,
thanks for joining us.
Thanks.